morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from, and welcome to this month's monthly Kube Chat. Today's topic is From Crawl to Run, Building a Scalable FinOps Strategy. And we've got both Joe and Mark here from our product marketing team to walk you through everything. So moving along into the agenda today. So we'll start off with just some brief introductions about our speakers, and then we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of the presentation today. So we're going to set the stage with just kind of setting that base level of what is FinOps, what are we even talking about here today. Then we're going to go into the FinOps maturity model and how this kind of ties into your Kubernetes environments and how you can start evaluating to see where you might fall in the maturity model. And then we're going to break this all down with a 4-step framework on how you can actually start advancing your FinOps capabilities today. And throughout that section, we do include a lot of examples, questions that you can ask your team, and ways to continuously evaluate yourselves as you walk through this process. And then we'll give you a little preview about IBM Kubecost and IBM Cloudability and how these tools can be used together to help you with everything that we've covered in this webinar. And then we'll also leave some time at the end for some Q&A. I did want to flag that we're recording today's session. So if you cannot stay for the whole thing, don't worry, we're gonna send you a recording out on Monday so you can watch it back. You'll also see on your console there is a link that says resources where you can download a version of today's slides. So feel free to download those. We also have a Q&A feature that should be there on your console. So throughout the duration of the session, if you want to submit any questions, feel free to submit those as we go, and we'll cover as many of them as we can once we get to the end of the presentation. So our first speaker is Joe. He is a Principal Product Marketing Manager here at IBM Kubecost. He has tons of experience across cybersecurity, cloud, fintech, cloud native. He knows a ton about Kubernetes. So if you have any questions for him or want to connect, feel free to click his LinkedIn profile there, and he'd be happy to meet with you and learn more about what you might be working on. And we also have Mark, who is the Director of Product Marketing for IBM Cloudability. So he's been working in GTM for over a decade and has a ton of experience in B2B SaaS. I also dropped a link to his LinkedIn, so if you'd like to connect with him and ask him questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to help you out there too. And then I will pass it over to Joe to talk about IBM Kubecost.
Thanks, Dee. Hi, everybody. Great to be with you today. Thanks for joining the webinar. As Dee mentioned, we're going to go into kind of the intersection of FinOps and Kubernetes for much of the content we're talking about here today. Both of these are really challenging things, right? If you work in FinOps as a practitioner, if you work in an engineering department as a developer and you use Kubernetes, you probably find that it's like doing, finance on hard mode. It's like doing software development on hard mode. You add them both together and you run into a lot of challenges. Today, we're going to talk about two solutions. One is IBM Cloudability, and two is IBM Kubecost, and the kind of end-to-end FinOps for Kubernetes solution that you can put together that covers all of your cloud costs, your entire Kubernetes estate. It allows you to do allocation down to the penny. If you don't know about IBM Kubecost, quick background is that we provide real-time cost visibility and insights for teams that are using Kubernetes. That allows you to continually understand, monitor, track, and improve your cloud spend, especially your Kubernetes spend over time. Kubecost runs on any environment from AWS and Azure to on-prem and in air-gapped environments. It's self-hosted and customer managed. We manage more than $5 billion worth of spend on behalf of our customers, and they're scattered across the world and consist of some of the biggest names that you've heard of, such as Coinbase and GitLab, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and others. With that, happy to hand this over to Mark and let him take us through what FinOps is and how you can increase your maturity level.
Great. Thank you, Joe, and very happy to be here. Thank you all for taking the time to attend today's webinar. It's much appreciated. Hopefully, we can impart some words of wisdom along the way. So, as I said, or as Dee kicked off, we're going to talk about kind of the maturity level of FinOps and, kind of things to sort of think about depending upon where you are within that maturity level. So just to sort of level set for those of you that are not familiar with FinOps, FinOps it's really about both culture and discipline. So there's a discipline framework. There's a very specific set of domains and capabilities that FinOps is comprised of. But at its core, it really boils down into kind of three main phases. The inform phase, which is really what are we spending, where are we spending it? The optimize phase, which really looks at how can you more efficiently run your business? How can you get your business and get your cloud spend specifically? And, as FinOps is emerging, non-cloud spend, optimize so that it really is running very efficiently. And then, how do you then, in the third sort of phase of FinOps, how do you do sort of ongoing operations, if you will, right? How do you take things like KPIs? How do you improve upon those? And how do you make sure that the costs that you are incurring as part of your cloud spend is aligned with the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve? And these phases, they all tie back, and there'll be a slide in the handouts afterwards which will talk about the domains and capabilities. There's four main domains within the FinOps framework. There's understanding usage and cost, there's quantifying business value, optimizing usage and cost, and then managing the overall FinOps practice. So those are the four domains, and within that there are 22 capabilities. And I just wanted to tee that up because as we talk about the maturity level, you'll see that there's not necessarily a direct tie-in to capabilities and maturity level. You could be very mature with some capabilities, and you can be less mature with other capabilities, but that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So, we'll kind of dive into that a little bit, as we move forward in these next few slides. So maybe we can move forward, Dee. So the maturity model, as I talked about, this is really broken down into three main phases. There's the crawl phase, the walk phase, and the run phase. And as I talk about the FinOps maturity model, I would encourage you to go to the FinOps Foundation website. There's a link towards the end of this, and you can get a lot more detail about this. But it's important for us to, sort of set the stage and how we want to think about this maturity model and how you can look for things to do within each of those phases that you're in. So, these capabilities, they're going to evolve at their own pace, right? In Kubernetes specifically, maturity helps you look at how do you move from a very basic structure where you're looking at just getting insights and visibility into your Kubernetes clusters to all the way over to the run phase where you're really looking to automate the process, automate and create a lot of efficiency kind of along the way. So you might be in Kubernetes, you might be crawling as it relates to something like sustainability, which is one of the emerging capabilities within the FinOps framework. But when you look at things like cost allocation, you may very well be at the run phase. So capabilities can be, different levels, and you can have different maturity levels for different levels, different maturity levels for different capabilities, and that's actually okay. And the key here is to really focus around making progress in places where it matters the most for your business. And every business is going to be different. So there's no sense in me saying, well, you should be at the run phase for this particular thing, because that might not fit with what your business goals are. So if we look specifically around Kubernetes examples for these different phases, in the crawl phase, we could be looking at things like per cluster tagging and partial allocation. In the walk phase, we could be looking at things like namespace level cost tracking and right sizing. And then at the run phase, it could be the automation and looking at things like policy-based workload tuning and forecasting. So again, maturity is not about reaching run everywhere. It's really about taking the capabilities that are most important to your business and that are driving the most value and acting upon those and developing a plan around that. So if we move to the next slide, if we look at crawl, walk, and run from an outcome perspective, and that's ultimately what you care about, right? So this slide here is talking about, the real value that teams can have at each of those various phases, each of those various maturity levels, right? So, these are just some examples, right? So at the crawl phase here, for cost allocation, maybe 50% of your costs are allocated, and you're doing it, at the cluster level, right? Your commitment coverage may be 60%. You may be having a very manual process to, buy and sell RIs and savings plans. And your forecasting may be fairly new, right? You may not be, spending a lot of resources trying to understand, future forecasting, right? So maybe you're looking at, a plus or minus 20%, but you're sort of in that early phase and you're kind of getting there. At the walk phase, this is where you might be allocating at the namespace level, right? So maybe 80% of your costs are actually, being allocating. Maybe you're forecasting here, it's getting a little bit better. You could be down to 15% or even 10%, and your commitment coverage has increased. You're right-sizing workloads, and you're making sure that you're not overspending for specific commitment levels. And the optimization actions as you move from crawl to walk. In the walk phase, you've got teams looking at these right sizing, right? It may just be at the crawl phase where everything's done manually. People are all doing things individually, but there's no cross-team collaboration. Maybe finance is the one that's kind of driving the ship at the crawl level, but now at the walk phase, you've got cross-functional teams, which is what FinOps is all about. You've got finance meeting with the engineering folks, and then as we move to the run phase, this is really where things are starting to get interesting, right? This is where your cost allocation is increased, probably upwards of or greater than 90%. You've got not only cluster and namespace tracking, but you're at workload level. You're looking at allocation of shared costs across those different areas of the business. Your forecasting is getting better. And you're getting kind of real-time data. So you're getting much more real-time data to allow you to be able to act upon the things that you need to do in terms of maximizing the return for your business. From an optimization perspective, this is not a one-off kind of set and forget. You're doing this workload tuning on a regular basis. You're doing it continuously. So you're always looking at ways to optimize spend and to ensure that it aligns with the performance that you need within that business. And then from a maturity level, here is where tools like Cloudability and Kubecost kind of come into play, right? So you've got dashboards now that can show different parts of the business, the views and the information that they need. So, one of the things that's really interesting on the Cloudability side is that, we can actually provide you views. If you're a finance person, you might not be interested you're probably likely not interested in looking at the engineering view of it. We can provide you that ability to get the view and look at the view that you need in order to do your business, but have it come from a common data set. So everybody's looking at the same set of data, but it's presented with the relevant information that person kind of cares about. So again, just to reiterate, you don't need to run everywhere. You can be running for certain things. In some cases, it's actually okay to continue to walk for certain of those capabilities. And if you remember, and again, we will have a slide in the handout, of those 22 capabilities, it's probably not realistic that you're going to be running for each of those 22 because it's not going to align with your business needs. You may be resource constrained. So, don't get concerned if you're not running the long race across every single type of FinOps capabilities. Just prioritize what's important to you from a business perspective. We can move to the next one, Dee. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about a framework that you can leverage, and a lot of this is outlined in a paper. We'll have a link to it at the end of this presentation. And this is a framework that you can look at across the board to try to evaluate and prioritize the things that you want to do to grow your maturity. And again, to not sound like a broken record, it's all about what matters most for your business. So your Kubernetes environment is your environment. It's your business. You have the way that you run your business. So, you need to do this evaluation with the line of sight into what you're trying to achieve from a business goal. There are some questions that you want to ask along the way, right? So at the evaluate phase, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later, can you allocate costs below the cluster level today? Is that something that you can currently do? If we look at, prioritize, which are the things that are going to give you the most bang for the buck, right? If we, for example, added namespace allocation, would that increase the accountability for your teams, right? Would that help increase the accountability? When you get to the third step of the framework, to plan, right? Here is where you want to look and assign owners to help with that forecasting, across all of your Kubernetes clusters. And then implementing, this is where you're actually getting into the meat of actually implementing what you've decided. So this 4-step process, may seem simplistic, but it really provides you a good way to kind of think about how do I want to look at each of those capabilities within the FinOps framework, and then be able to figure out how to action that, how to move from a crawl phase, let's say, to eventually get up to a run phase. So we'll dive into a little bit more detail on these steps here. So first of all, as I talked about, you want to evaluate your current capabilities, right? This is getting a baseline. This is really understanding what's working today, what is holding you back in terms of implementing, a FinOps strategy. You're going to look at each of those capabilities. You're going to say, where are we now? What's working? What's not working? And a little checklist here that sort of helps you look at that is, you want to be able to look at each capability and say, well, why are we doing this, right? What's the purpose of this, right? The FinOps framework is a great tool. The guidance that they provide in terms of what to do within these various capabilities is really, they really do a very good job of this. So comparing to best practices that the FinOps framework provides, looking at and being honest about where this maturity level aligns to what teams are focused on today. You want to talk across platform. Across individuals. You want to look across engineering folks, finance folks. Everyone's going to have a different view of cost data and what they think is important. And then finally, look at blockers. Right? Are there technical blockers that you are encountering with your current capabilities, right? Do you have missing tags? Do you have lack of clarity on who actually, has ownership? So the example I could give you here, around evaluation is, start with allocation, right? Can you allocate by namespace or cluster? Are these shared services that are shared across workloads, are they distributed fairly, right? Is that something that you need to kind of look at? Do we have the right labeling? Is labeling enough today to be able to support this cost tracking back to the business? So certainly with Kubernetes and Kubernetes teams, allocation, is a good place to start. If you're only doing cluster level allocation today, there's clearly going to be, an opportunity to improve. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So the next slide here, we're going to talk about prioritizing investments, right? So you understand what your baseline is. You understand what your business goals are. So which are the capabilities based upon that evaluation are going to unlock the best value for you, right? You're going to know whether you're in the crawl, walk, or run phase. You're going to look and understand where there are blockers that are currently happening. Are they blockers in terms of data? Is it blockers in terms of accountability and ownership? Here, when you prioritize, you want to look at the value, right? So if you're going to look to move from crawl to walk, or even to run, right? what is the value of that going to be? And that's really looking at, cost versus, business outcomes and how those are aligned. It's no use spending a lot of money to get a very small incremental value. You want to be able to prioritize the things that are going to have the most bang for the buck. Effort is an important thing here, right? Like some things are very easy to do. Some things are harder to do. So doing things that are hard to do, that are going to have less incremental value, probably, wouldn't fall, at the top of that priority list. So really that balance between effort and oncoming business value. And then the cut line is important, right? So it's very important to look at the things that are really going to create some demonstrated ROI. And that means, not looking at things that have a very small level of ROI, keeping those things that are kind of above that cut line. So ROI is critical here, right? We need to understand what's blocking us from these decisions. We need to understand here which capability is going to give us the greatest ROI. And how much lift is it? How much lift is it across the organization? Because you have to, part of the FinOps culture and part of the FinOps framework is to look and ensure that you have accountability and you have buy-in across the organization. So if one person wants to, take the initiative and drive it forward, but they're not going to, get the support across the organization for that particular initiative, then it may not be the best thing to focus on. The third step is around planning resources and tooling. So once you've prioritized where to invest, now you're kind of looking to plan to move forward, right? So you want to be able to, create this foundational level based upon the priorities that you have identified. Who are the right people to do that? What tools do you need? And then, most importantly is what are the milestones associated with that? So pulling out and identifying who's going to lead the effort is really important. Is it going to be someone, let's say a FinOps leader? Is it going to be driven out of finance? Is it going to be driven truly cross-functionally where everybody kind of has ownership? What are the tools that you need to speed up adoption? What are the things that are missing today that can help you, effectively focus around that initiative that you've identified a priority on? You have to do this cross-functionally. You cannot do this in a vacuum. It simply won't work because you'll take it so far and you'll require some help or support from another team, and you'll likely get a lot of pushback where it's going to be like, well, we don't have the resources for that, or that's not something that is a priority for our business. So make sure that the things that you're focused on before you actually go and do the execution part, you've got the right buy-in. In Kubernetes environments, it's very important for things like to have things like tagging, automation, cost exporting capabilities. Those are critical to have in place as part of that. And clear milestones. I mean, that goes without thinking. If you're going to kick off an initiative to make some improvements to move your maturity level forward, having appropriate milestones in place that you can have goals and to be able to measure those goals and be able to see, are you actually making progress is critically important. So here, you're shaping your plan, right? You need to understand, who's going to own this, who's going to drive it. Do you have the right tools in place? And last but not least, what milestones do you have that demonstrate that you're actually making progress to what you're trying to achieve? And then finally, once you've gone from the planning phase, it's all about implementation, right? So, if you jump to step 4 without step 2 and step 3, you'd be doing something that probably doesn't have the right level of alignment across the organization, the right level of focus around your business. So again, ownership is key here. Understanding, who's kind of doing what. I would recommend here that you want to roll out changes kind of gradually. I think that trying to boil the ocean, so to speak, is probably not, the best idea. Maybe in Kubernetes, you want to look at enforcing tagging policies, for example, setting up some automation around cost alerting, or piloting workload level allocation. It's very clear and very important that you need to communicate changes. So if you're making these incremental changes, highlight the changes you're making, highlight what outcomes you're expecting by making those changes, and communicate that often. We talked about ROI in the last couple of slides, but measuring the ROI as early as you can to show that what you're doing is making progress. And if for some reason it's not, then it's actually okay to go back and maybe reassess and maybe look for some other initiatives that are going to generate ROI. I would say don't give up too early. These things can take some time, but understanding kind of an incremental ROI that you are, achieving from things like time savings or cost or automation efforts or overall visibility is really important. And having milestones, having check-ins, right? That's really critically important. Pulling that cross-functional team together, discussing not only outcomes related to ROI, but, is this actually working, right? Are the milestones being achieved? And more importantly, are there blockers to achieving it if for some reason it's not? I would say that as you move through these different maturity levels, it is important to document, understand the maturity shifts that are occurring, as you evolve these capabilities. And again, measurement, tracking, and ongoing communication is critically important here. So with that, I'm going to just wrap up here with kind of a real life example. So let's apply the framework that I talk about, and let's talk about cost allocation in Kubernetes, right? So here you are at the evaluation stage. You are looking at cluster level tagging. It's not consistent. You don't have a way to track shared services. Then when you go to the prioritization phase of it, if you could improve the allocation, that would really unlock team ownership. That would create more transparency, would create more ownership across your teams. Then at the planning stage, who's going to own this? Who's going to be the platform owner, right? And then here, the plan is, we're going to do some piloting. We're going to pilot some namespace tagging. We're going to pilot being able to look at shared costs and be able to allocate those, across the business. And then the implementation phase, here we would want to be able to enable cost visibility on a daily basis by namespace with the tagging policies that we have defined. And then hopefully by going through these 4 stages that I talked about, we're going to get much more mature cost allocation. That's going to drive overall visibility into costs. It's going to help drive ownership, and then provide you a meaningful way to measure the ROI that your Kubernetes infrastructure is providing for your business. So with that, I'm going to flip it over to Joe, who's going to talk about FinOps specifically for Kubernetes.
Thanks, Mark. That was awesome. I learned something. I always learn something when I hear you talk about FinOps. It is a iterative, continuous journey, much like working with Kubernetes, right? In its infancy, as you're experimenting with Kubernetes, you get exposed to the potential for complexity, the potential to spend a lot of money, not maliciously, just easily on accident, because of how dynamic, volatile, and complex it is to work with containers. I mentioned at the beginning that doing FinOps for Kubernetes is kind of like doing FinOps in hard mode, right? And I kind of stick by that. Similar to how doing software development in Kubernetes is kind of doing it in hard mode. Kubernetes really just exponentially expands the amount of complexity, the amount of moving parts, the amount of things that you have to pay attention to do software development in a cost-effective and sustainable manner, right? Without it negatively impacting your customers through a poor experience, or your application through bottlenecked performance, or the bank account of your organization through the cost that doing those things correctly can certainly drive. So everything is just a bit more difficult. Everything's a bit more complex. And some of the unique challenges that teams working with Kubernetes face in FinOps are in that inform stage, right? When you're looking at collecting data, understanding and gathering the metrics you need to be able to do a good job of monitoring it, that multi-tenant auto-scaling clusters really make it difficult to understand who spent that money, which team, which project, which product, in which environment. It can be really challenging to figure out the sources of cost within a complex Kubernetes environment. It can also be challenging when you have things that exist at one moment and don't exist at another, right? Ephemeral pod changes can cost money by the minute, right? And if you've got a report that only tells you about your costs once a day, or once a week, or in some cases once a month, then you're doomed to always be surprised by the content of that bill and the big number that's likely to be at the bottom of it. There's also a high degree of cardinality, right? A lot of labeling, a lot of tagging, a lot of product owners and pod owners, and metrics that demand tooling that understands Kubernetes, understands the way that teams work with Kubernetes, right? Kubecost was kind of born in the cloud native ecosystem. And I like to say that it was, built for DevOps by DevOps people. And I think we wanted to give application development teams the tools that they specifically need, just like FinOps has tools that they need, finance has tools that they need. I think specialized tools that address FinOps needs for Kubernetes teams are the route to success here. Otherwise, you'll find yourself stitching together spreadsheets to try and do allocation. You'll inundate your development teams with questions about cost and about what you can potentially save that detracts them from building great code, the next great feature, delighting your customers and pushing innovation forward to beat your competitors. So being able to wrap your head around that is really important, and then approaching it in a slightly different way. Why is it so important to empower developers with these developer-specific tools around Kubernetes cost visibility and cost optimization? Because they can make the biggest impact, right? They are the ones with the power to be able to reduce costs, to optimize costs, and to build a culture of engineering cost efficiency, so that this doesn't become, your semi-annual whack-a-mole contest to cut costs. Shifting left is the way that we kind of term this, right? Moving cost savings closer and closer to point zero in the software development lifecycle. Building cost-effective code in the first place, testing it, validating it, deploying it, measuring and correcting areas where there might be a misconfiguration or unnecessary overhead that's being paid for that could be right-sized. Traditional FinOps, you would kind of review cost data after the software has been deployed, after the money's been spent, but before the bill comes, right? With shift left FinOps, you're looking at cost data in real time, right? Every hour, every 15 seconds in some cases, to understand what the immediate impacts are to your decisions, to the resources that you provision, to the workloads that you have an opportunity to tune to run more cost effectively. You're looking at these things within your CI/CD pipeline, inside of your own development workflows, and you're addressing those issues as they're detected. That means you're much less likely to have that gigantic surprise bill at the end of the month that causes your boss to come knock on the door and ask why. In traditional FinOps, finance would typically analyze and escalate cost issues, right? It's talking about a knock on the door. Hey, how come our AWS EKS costs went up by 50% this month? Did we launch a new product? Did we add a bunch of customers? Can you help explain this to me? With shift left FinOps, it's the engineers, the development teams themselves that see this first kind of canary in the coal mine signal of a runaway cost situation, right? They can see that in real time. They can course correct that in real time. And instead of having a finance or a FinOps person asking them why they spent more than what was expected, they don't have to have that conversation at all. They can continue building code instead. In traditional FinOps approaches, you've got to rework software. You've got to pull back deployments. You've got to delay the velocity of your software development pipeline. And at the end of it all, you typically still see rather large bills when it comes to Kubernetes. With the other FinOps solution, everything just moves faster. So kind of in the world before, right, at this crawl level of allocation in Kubernetes, everything hurts. Cost gets reported only at a cluster level, maybe at a provider level. You've got inconsistent or missing labels and tags across workloads, which means sharing costs, identifying who the owners and the drivers of those costs can still be a big mystery that you have to unravel. It gets tough to identify and split shared resources and do that kind of show back and charge back activity you want to do. Engineering teams don't know what they're spending, don't know if they're doing something wrong until after it's already happened. And there's really no linkage between resource use and cost, right? This is monopoly money. It's like, make-believe numbers. How do we make that more actionable? How do we bring that down? We can go to the next slide for that. You can move to the walk phase with doing FinOps for Kubernetes, right? You can unlock some visibility. You can cover the gaps in understanding and metrics that you have. You can get actionable insights about things that you can go do right now to save money that aren't going to jeopardize the stability or the reliability or the performance of your systems. When you get to this phase, you can see namespace level cost allocation, right? And this covers across teams. So I can now start to look at things like, what is the cost of this app, this product? I can get consistent with my labeling, my tagging, and that's going to support things like show back, charge back, reporting. My finance team is going to be able to love that I can show them exactly which teams are spending more, which teams are more effective and efficient, and then we can identify new goals to move forward with. I can share service costs fairly and distribute them among teams. I understand who the owners of those services are. I can understand how much of a service they're utilizing, so I can give them the appropriate percentage of that cost as well. I can look at dashboards on a daily basis, reports on a daily basis. They arrive in my inbox on an automated schedule, and it shows me costs segmented by whatever business metric is important to our organization. Maybe it's by project or initiative or by business unit. At the walk phase, I should be able to do that. And I start to have engineers really taking ownership of the changes that they make as it pertains to cost, right? When they understand the implications, they are much more likely to kind of self-correct there instead of letting cost issues persist. We can go to the next step. This is where we really start to align, right? When finance and engineering come together, we've talked a lot, and Mark mentioned quite a bit that, FinOps is a team sport, right? It takes a lot of cross-functional people, a lot of cross-functional departments to get together to sing from the same sheet music, to develop shared goals, to develop milestones and KPIs that help them understand if they're on the right path. So getting to a high level of maturity with FinOps for Kubernetes requires a lot more than just reports and just dashboards and setting budgets and getting alerts. It takes a shared common goal, shared common interest. It takes rallying around this challenge and kind of going after it as a team. It requires accountability. It requires trust. Trust not only in the underlying data that you're looking at, right? Is that truly a source of truth for us, but also trust in your team and your teammates that everybody wants to pull their weight and achieve this goal. Without collaboration, finance is always going to be chasing engineering, asking questions. With it, engineers get to see cost as a part of their workflow, and it becomes a part of their domain. It's something that they start to understand. Without collaboration, engineers just don't understand the context of cost. They don't understand if it's their problem or the other team's problem, or if it's just the way that it's got to be. It's got to be this expensive. With collaboration, finance gets some real-time visibility. If they've got questions, they're not going to be big surprise end of month bill questions. They're going to be, hey, did we add some new capacity? Did we move some workloads? They're going to be much easier to answer types of questions. Without, you've got, optimizations that stall because engineers go, is this going to break my app? If I do this right sizing, what's the negative impact of it? Don't we really need this for like a big Black Friday, high web traffic event? With collaboration, teams are going to communicate about stuff like that, right? They're going to look at the same data. They're going to be on the same page. They're going to take actions that they all agree on. Without collaboration, savings might be found, right? Every once in a while, you might find some spare change in the couch cushions, but you're never going to materially move the needle in the right direction on long-term cost efficiency. With collaboration, that is totally possible. You can make these decisions proactively. You can set budgets and actually adhere to them. That means your projects aren't going to get canceled. You're probably not going to have, a loss of developers on your team if the going gets tough financially. And go to the next one. So these two solutions can come together and really provide you with an end-to-end FinOps solution for your entire cloud investment and your Kubernetes costs as well. IBM Kubecost, IBM Cloudability, two different products, but we are now happily a part of the IBM family, and our products have a really great better together story. If you're looking to do FinOps at any level of maturity, we will meet you where you are with IBM Cloudability. If you are on the Kubernetes journey and you're looking to do it more cost effectively and with better visibility and control, Kubecost is a great solution you should be looking at. So real-time FinOps for K8's teams. We've got a little screenshot here of what the dashboard looks like. This is a friendly and approachable piece of software. It's purpose-built for DevOps teams, purpose-built for platform engineering teams. It allows you to understand, to allocate, and to optimize, and then control your Kubernetes spend across your entire estate. Some of the really high-level neat features here: real-time cost allocation, real-time visibility, really, really granular. You can get down to the container level. You can do forecasting and set budgets for any Kubernetes concept, any business concept, and then generate alerts in real time when teams reach milestones or thresholds of that budget, or even prevent them from provisioning additional resources if they've exceeded their budget. You can do continuous savings insights so that it's not just a once in a while cost optimization activity, it's all the time. Every dollar matters, and you can continually improve your costs day by day, hour by hour with Kubecost. It supports self-hosted deployments. It extends visibility to on-prem Kubernetes, really Kubernetes anywhere in any environment, works across your entire estate. Go to the next one. Mark, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I did, as this is the Kubecost webinar. For those of you that are not familiar with Cloudability, I just want to do a quick little, 1-minute intro here. So as Joe mentioned, this is an enterprise FinOps solution. So as where Joe mentioned that Kubecost is very specifically focused on the Kubernetes space, we've got a solution that is multi-cloud, non-cloud. We can pull in non-cloud costs. So it really all starts with, kind of understanding where the cloud costs are, how much you're spending, and then to be able to, leverage that to, if we look back at the FinOps framework, to be able to optimize, what you're spending with things like commitment management, being able to provide right sizing for workloads that are being potentially underused, but you're still incurring costs for. We've got a very sophisticated budgeting and forecasting solution within our product, and as part of that, we can actually detect when you're approaching or when it's anticipated that you're going to be overspending based upon what your budget amount was. As I said, we're multi-cloud. We support all the major cloud providers. We do have some rudimentary Kubernetes capabilities, but for Kubernetes only environments, really, I would encourage you to look at Kubecost. Because we're a FinOps tool, we provide views for developers, but we also provide a lot of our reporting and our dashboard capability for non-engineers. So if you're a finance person or a FinOps person, and budgeting is a prime example of that, that's probably something that a finance or a FinOps practitioner is much more interested in. And then also being able to take the cost that the tool is providing and to be able to tie those back to specific parts of the business that maybe one of those individuals is doing. And sort of my final little plug is, I would not take our word for it in terms of the market leadership of IBM Cloudability. I would encourage you to go look at Gartner and Forrester, who are sort of the leaders within the tech landscape from an analyst perspective, and you'll see that we're consistently ranked as one of the better solutions in the marketplace. So there's a lot of good information within those reports. You can download those from our website. So just to kind of take us home here, we're just about done here. So some next steps for you as FinOps practitioner or DevOps practitioners, what should you do next? I would encourage you to look out over the next quarter and try to find one thing that you can action on. Pick a capability to improving. Look at something like allocation, forecasting, tagging, whatever makes the most sense for your business. I would then, using the steps that I outlined earlier, pick an environment. Look at Kubecost allocations, look at Cloudability policies, focus around a single team or a single cluster, and really, once you've piloted, once you focus on what you're going to pilot on, get some KPIs under your belt. Define what those KPIs are, because without measurement, you can invest a lot of time and work, and then get asked by folks throughout the organization, well, was it effective? Did what you put into place work? And if you don't have a goal and you don't have something that you're trying to achieve out of that's measured by a KPI, it's really hard. So examples that, maybe you want to get to cost per service. Maybe you want to look at what percentage of coverage you can get from a commitment perspective. What percent of savings are you looking to right-size those Kubernetes infrastructure? So I'll let you add. I don't know if Joe, if you want to sort of take us home and just add a couple of thoughts, and then we can just turn it back to Dee, and then I think we do have some Q&A at the end.
I think these are great. A great set of next steps for teams to be able to really kind of take a hold of, right? Be realistic about the goals that you have. I would encourage people, especially if you're earlier on in your FinOps journey, don't make one of your KPIs to save $100,000, right? Like, make the KPIs the things that are going to lead to being able to understand if you've got waste, understand where that waste is, and then understand how you're going to approach remediating that waste, right? Like, I think that those are a bit lower hanging fruit. They're probably things that you and your team can manage and actually get results on in a relatively short period of time. And that's going to make the rest of the organization happy. And you probably won't be surprised that they're going to give you support, right? They're going to want to get involved. There's a lot of stakeholders, talk to them, rally them, get on the same page with them, and take your first step into this. Want to say thanks to everybody before we provide some additional resources here and then take some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mark and Joe. Appreciate you walking us through all of that. So we did want to share some additional resources here for some of the things that we talked about today. So if you download the PDF version of the slides that are in your console there, you'll be able to actually click on these links since you can't click on your screen. So we did include a link to the FinOps framework, which includes all the capabilities and domains that we discussed today, as well as a link to their documentation about the maturity model. so you can dig into that in a bit more detail. But I also included some IBM resources that we have here for IBM Kubecost and IBM Cloudability. So there's a couple of guides that we've released that go into a lot more detail about how you can do this specifically. And we also just released an ebook about the future of FinOps. So definitely be sure to check that out. And again, I will email a copy of the PDF to you in addition to the recording, so you can dig into that later. And with that, we'll move into some Q&A. We did get some pre-submitted questions that we'll start with, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into your Q&A feature of your console there, and we'll definitely get to as many as we can. So to start, someone had asked, what is the accuracy of our products?
Yeah, I think that's probably a bit of a softball question, but I would say pretty darn accurate. I mean, we're talking about accuracy, down to the penny, right? So all of our cost data is getting pulled directly from cloud provider cost usage files. All of the rates that we are getting for things like commitment management or right sizing, that's taken directly from the cloud providers. So it's pretty accurate. I mean, it's as accurate as pulling the data in manually and putting it into a spreadsheet. Although with that, there probably is some manipulation that could be room for some error. But I can speak from a Cloudability perspective that it's extremely accurate. If there's anything specific for Kubernetes, I'll let Joe kind of weigh in on that.
Yeah, for Kubecost and Kubernetes, we're taking real time metrics and analyzing them so that we can understand who's using what and how much of it, right? Whether that's RAM or CPU or GPU resources or persistent volumes or any other service. And then we are marrying that to publicly available billing information from large cloud providers such as Azure and AWS. And then we reconcile that with what you're actually spending, and that'll include all of your enterprise savings plans and your discounts and your RIs and things like that. So it is as accurate as it can possibly be, but we still give you this preview that is also pretty accurate before that reconciliation even happens. That's how development teams can see costs in real time. In fact, Kubecost learns over time about your discounts and about your savings plans and things like that. And so it's able to automatically adjust after it's seen a bit of data to give you even more accurate upfront costs before your bill even arrives in your inbox. So that works out. I see we've got a couple of questions that are coming in live as well. Just wanted to answer 3 most important FinOps KPIs that you recommend for Kubernetes. I think the king of the hill KPI is an efficiency level target, right? You want to be able to identify a reasonable level of efficiency, which means that you are reserving and using an appropriate and non-wasteful amount of resources. That will address things like the overall efficiency level of your workloads, the overall efficiency level of your infrastructure, the results of your right-sizing activities, and a number of other FinOps-related and cost optimization metrics. I think you can also look at some other things such as the amount of waste. You can look at the number of orphaned or abandoned resources. I would, I don't know that I would give you hard and fast percentages because so much of it is relative to where you are now and where you want to get to. But I would say, set reasonable expectations to, if you want to get twice as good, give yourself 2 or 3 steps to get from where you are now to there, and then reassess, and then sharpen your pencil and come up with even better milestones to pursue next.
Great. It looks like we have one more question that we received from the Q&A feature. So we'll end with this one before we wrap up for today. So someone asked, do you plan to create a feature like Cast AI and Perfect Scale to right-size pods on the fly?
I see that question from Waleed. In fact, Kubecost has a lot of that capability already. So there are more than 15 right-sizing capabilities within Kubecost that we surface. We've added even more now that we are a part of the family with IBM Turbonomic. And those range from tuning workloads to, as an example, turning down clusters and namespaces over the weekend in non-production environments to be able to save a significant amount of cost. And if you use the cluster controller, which is an optional daemon set from Kubecost, you can automate all of that to happen without human intervention. And there's quite a bit of customization capability. Yes, we are continuing to work on that path because doing right sizing in highly dynamic environments requires the kinds of cost savings automations that we have today, and it's going to require more as we go forward. So this is an exciting area that we are investing in.
Great. Thank you so much to our speakers today. You all did amazing. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining. I know everyone's probably super, super busy with work, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us and learn with us. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to always reach out. Our email is team-kubecost@ibm.com. So feel free to shoot us a message and we can chat with you offline. And again, I'll send this recording. But that's where we'll end it. So thanks again, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.